Hello, everybody, and welcome back to How to Renovate. I hope you're having a good week so far. In this episode 28, we are going to talk about how to avoid decision fatigue. Now, if you've done a renovation before, you probably know what I'm talking about. There is an overwhelming choice out there, and sometimes, as good as that may be, sometimes it can also really slow down your decisions because you just don't know what to choose because purely the amount of choice is just too much. But in this episode, I want to give you 5 ways you can tackle that. So, 5 things you can do to avoid decision fatigue. Let's get into the episode. So, if you've been listening for a while, you will know by now that everything I teach about renovations falls under my 5 pillar process. And the information in this episode falls under pillar 4, practical management. Let's get into the episode. Okay, number 1, how to avoid decision fatigue is to decide early. And again, if you've been listening for a while, you will know I'm all about the upfront planning and knowing the sequence of renovation. But really, if you decide early on your items like your fixtures, fittings, tiles, window style, door style, all of those things, if you decide at the start, then you will have a picture in your mind of what you want your home to look like, and you will make your decisions early. So you're not having to make those decisions last minute throughout the process when your contractor is pressuring you for decisions. You will have really planned it and thought about it at the start before you renovated on what you wanted in your new home. Now, I'm not saying you have to decide every single thing. Of course, there'll be decisions as you go through the renovation because things change, or perhaps you weren't able to make a decision early on the exact thing you wanted, or perhaps something has become out of stock. So, if you can decide early on the majority of your finishes and your taps, any fixtures and fittings, and so on, that's really, really going to help you avoid decision fatigue later on as you go through the project because you would have already made the decisions. So you're not going to have that pressure from your contractor and the overwhelm of having to make those decisions when you're under pressure for a decision. And then number 2 is to have a plan. Now, again, I always talk about planning your renovations. Plan at the start so that you are on top of it and you are in control as you're going through it. This saves time, it saves money, it saves stress. So this is why I'm always talking about planning. But when it comes to decision fatigue on the things you need to decide on during your renovation, which obviously is generally things like finishes, tiles, taps, flooring, light fixtures, then it's always good to have a plan. Now, when you're deciding on your materials, one thing that you can do to help avoid that overwhelm is to have a vision for each room. So have a plan, have 1 or 2 guide images. Perhaps these images are from Pinterest, perhaps you found them in a magazine or a book, but really narrow down your vision to just 1 or 2 images, because that image will help you decide on what you want in your home. So if it's a style you really love, or if it's a feeling about the image you really love, you can always refer back to it. So when you're making decisions on anything else in the home or for that particular room, you can refer back to that image and say, oh, does it suit this image? Would it look good in this room that I really love? Are there any kind of style elements that match anything in this image? So that just really makes your decision process a lot easier if you have a kind of a North Star, a guide image for each room. It will narrow down your choices and it will also just get rid of that overwhelm a bit. If you need help with this, I have created a masterclass called How to Create Strategic and Intentional Style Boards. You can find this on the website at southplacestudio.com/masterclasses. Now, this masterclass I've put together for exactly this reason. It really forces you to examine your style, what works in a room, how to put that all down on paper or in a document, or whether it's a digital form or on paper. So for exactly this purpose, it's to avoid the overwhelm when you're having to make decisions on your choices of whether that be at the beginning or throughout your project. It's something that you can just refer back to over and over again throughout your renovation process. So do go and check that out. It's a really, really helpful resource. It's a paid for masterclass, but do go and have a look at it. It's really going to help you avoid decision fatigue and also just avoid all of that overwhelm of making the decisions and choosing items from everything that's out there. And then that nicely leads us on to number 3, which is to really nail down your style and have boundaries. And by boundaries, I mean have style boundaries. So again, if you have that one style board or that one image that you love, and you know that you really love it and you want your home to have that kind of feel or that kind of style, then you have essentially nailed down your style. And then that is going to make your decisions a lot easier, because you then know whether what you're looking at, whether it be online, in shops, will or will not fit into your North Star, into your style board, or into this image that you love, this vision that you have for that room. So that really does help narrow down the choices. It helps you make quicker decisions, because you're instantly eliminating, let's say, 90% of what's out there if you know which style you're after. And then out of what's left, you can hopefully have an easier time of making a decision on the item you're having to make a decision on. So obviously nailing down that style and deciding what it may be, whether it be traditional, whether it be modern, that is then your style boundary. That forms your style boundary. So anything outside of that just makes the decision easier. You can eliminate those because they're not within your style boundary. So it helps to avoid that fatigue, the overwhelm of how much is out there, and hopefully will just help you just make the decisions a lot quicker and a lot easier. And then number 4 is to use deadlines to your advantage. And by this, I do not mean let your contractor give you deadlines, because if you've been listening to the podcast so far, you know that I always say, be ahead of your contractor. Don't wait for your contractor to tell you that he needs the taps or he needs the tiles or he needs the flooring, because the more often than not, they will not give you enough time to make that decision. They will not give you a buffer. You need to be ahead with those decisions and what you want in your home. Otherwise, you'll find yourself flustered, having to decide at the last minute. You'll find yourself restricted to choices because only certain things might be available in the quantity you need at the time you need for quick delivery and so on. So I do not mean your contractor deadlines. I mean, give yourself a deadline. So let's say at the very beginning of the project, when you're first planning your renovation, before anyone's on site, before the contractor arrives, even perhaps before you've hired an architect, give yourself a deadline to make some decisions on the style you would like, on whether it be modern or traditional or Victorian or Art Deco, and then decide on your style, and then just set some gentle deadlines for yourself. So let's say you're starting planning your project in January. By end of February, say, you want to have all the decisions made on the materials and the vision on how you want your home to look. And then that will give you a deadline of when you need to make the decisions by, so that when your contractor comes on site with their deadlines, you're ready. You've made all the decisions, and then you're taking that decision fatigue out of it. You're not having to rush around and make decisions and be stressed when your contractor is asking you for those items, because you've already done it to your own deadline. And then number 5 is to avoid doom scrolling. Oh, it's so easy to do. There's so many lovely images on Pinterest, on Instagram, and you could just be looking for days and days and days. But I think all the tips I've given you so far is going to help you avoid doom scrolling, because if you know what you're after, you've set your style boundaries, you've got your 1 or 2 images, your North Star, and you're working to within those boundaries, then hopefully you won't be scrolling and scrolling looking for a style you love still, looking for an item you love. I think everything we've said so far will help you to avoid doom scrolling, and I think particularly avoid doom scrolling when you're in the renovation. So perhaps it is at that point where the contractor said, oh, you need tiles for this floor, and perhaps at that point you hadn't yet decided which tiles you want for that floor, and then you go online and keep looking and looking and looking, and then not making the decision, completely getting decision fatigue, and not being able to decide on the item that you need to get quite urgently. So but again, if you've nailed down your style and you set those style boundaries, you won't need to doom scroll. You will know what you're looking for. You'll know the style you're after, and you'll be able to gauge whatever will look good for the vision for your own home. So that nicely brings us to the end of this episode, everybody. So just to run over this again is number 1, decide early. Number 2, have a plan. Number 3, nail down your style and have boundaries. Number 4, use deadlines to your advantage. And number 5, avoid doom scrolling. I really hope those help you avoid that dreaded decision fatigue. It's bye for now, and I'll see you in the next episode. For more information on my 5-pillar process for successful renovation, you can go directly to southplacestudio.com/pillars, where you'll find an introduction to the process which covers each of the pillars and what they cover. We also have a number of other free renovation resources. Go now to southplacestudio.com/freebies. I have created some amazing freebies for you there. There is one on the process, like we just said. There is one on planning permission. There is one on kitchen design. There is another one on lighting planning. Go and check those out. There's so much free information there to help you with your renovation.